Once a year. It is my pleasure to welcome you all at this third Leaders Angle of the month. And I see a lot of people in front of me, and that is very exciting at this early hour of the day. We invite you all to take part in our live debate, our Twitter debate. You all know the hashtag by now, hashtag USBLA. So if you want to take part in that, you're most welcome. And then by now, you know that we are live streaming these events, all of them. The technology is in place because we also teach via online mode these days, some of our courses. So that is working. So if you have friends who can't be here at these Leaders Angle events, this is the ideal way of also hearing what is happening here. Apologies from Professor Piet Mudeer. He just came back from overseas, and he also has a board meeting, advisory board meeting of the business school today. So his apologies. And then, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker. We're very excited. We have a global expert here this morning, and a South African global expert on megatrends, Dr. Coeni van Beek. He's a member of PwC's Global Leadership and Strategy team. He has lived in 3 continents and has worked in more than 100 countries, and I think that's impressive when I read that. He has a deep understanding of complexity in all its forms and the impact that it has on organizations. Dr. van Beek is, of course, also a Marty alumnus, and he has a PhD from Tilburg University in the Netherlands. Coeni, I'm going to hand over to you, and we're looking forward to hear about the megatrends. Thank you.
Thanks. The only place I'm ever called doctor is at academic institutions, so that's the first thing. And they've told me, this is recorded, I'm not allowed to move beyond this point in here, and I'm not allowed to move beyond this point. I've been often called the South African, but I've also never been called the global expert. So there's a lot of new things for me in that. In order to pay for the lovely breakfast you just had, each one of you need to buy a copy of the book. There's a very special discount price on it today. You can see it's 330, not dollars, rand, so it's really cheap. So just make sure when you leave, buy the book, and we'll be off your net. Otherwise, you're going to get these little brochures and reminders. And then you can just put it in spam every time you get the mail, and it's sorted out. Remind me that I remind them at the end of the session as well. Speed dating mega trends. A couple of things. This is what I'm trying to get. I'm going to try and get through today. By the way, let me just get. I met my grandmother, who died about 8 years ago. It was just when I seriously started traveling. She lived in Admiraal, and she always said the last word she said to me, she and myself speaking face to face, was, whenever you speak to people, have a jacket on. Because it shows you respect them. I have now shown the respect, but seeing that none of you is respecting me, I'm going to take my jacket off. I've never had 2 microphones either. This is a first. There's a lot of firsts for me in this. Right, now we can start working. This is what I'm trying or hope to cover today. Now, one of the things I am never set on an agenda. I actually have notes for this. My wife said to me, why are you so nervous? Just shoot from the hip, because this is how you usually do it. So I have notes. I'm going to try and stick to them, and I'm going to try and get to this. I will touch on just what speed dating is, for those of you that don't know. And any of you that's here because you think you're going to get a potential partner, this is the wrong meeting. You didn't get it right. Touch on the mega trends, and you will see there's nothing new about it. This is what's so cool about being a global expert. You can take stuff that's out there, you can just repackage it and give it a cool name, and then talk about it if people think it's new. There's actually nothing new, but there is something new about how we think about them and those points where they collide. because that is actually where the really seriously cool things happen. I'm going to talk with the 15 questions. I have to get to 15 questions. I was earlier this week, I'm on 13. I'm like, this thing has been advertised for 15 questions. I need 2 more questions. So you'll see the last question is, how do you contact me? And then we'll just have some time for Q&A. I am really, when it comes to this, I used to be a policeman many, many years ago. So you'll see I move around a lot. They say it's better it's more difficult to hit a moving target. But if there's anybody and you want to scream out and you want to say something right now, you know, screw the 15 minutes at the end. Let's just go to the question and deal with it. My wife, who's the most intelligent person I know, always say, if you want to impress people, you need to talk to the auditive learners. So that I'm talking to those. You need to show the visual learners. We're going to try and do that. And if you're really good, you need to get to the tactile people that want to touch stuff. So the way I'm going to talk about megatrends. Oh, sorry. Any lawyers in the room? Just one. So I'm looking at you now. You're on the spot. If anybody asks us about this one day, maybe I should give you money so that we have something. When we talk about PricewaterhouseCoopers, it's a network of independent legal entities, which means I actually work for the US firm. I sit in New York. I'm seconded to the global firm that's a legal entity that sits in London, and any other PwC people that might be here are actually from the African firm. So it's this network of independent legal firms. I need to say that to you, just to be clear. And I'm expressing my own point of view, not that I'm saying here's the official point of view of PwC. Is that good? Did you note that? I'll sign that afterwards. What is speed dating? I actually had to look it up. It's an organized social activity. Sounds almost like university. I'm starting to, you know, some of my kids are still at university, and I think that's maybe a good way to describe university, in which people seek romantic relationships, have a series of short conversations with potential partners in order to determine whether or not there's mutual interest. So what I'm trying to do, I'm going to tell you what the megatrends are, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions because you can't do it. And then hopefully you'll see if there's some interest. And the whole purpose, what I'm trying to leave you with at the end of today, is just to think about this. None of what I'm going to do is deep enough to really get into this. I can do a week-long lecture on this, and every day we can work with. So I'm literally just going to tease you. I love this ad.
Il rentre dans les maisons, il saccage tout. No kidding.
I will tell you, if you sit in New York and it's minus 26 degrees centigrade, you appreciate ads like this. Santam, thank you very much. Tell everybody around it, the world, it's actually viral. Every South African that I know of that's outside of South Africa sent me a copy of this. Have you seen this? But it's actually really cool to use and think about when you want to think about megatrends, because the things they talk about there, resource scarcity, load shedding, crime that comes with, and car guards and high walls that comes with rapid urbanization. Even if you look at the two groups of people they have the traditional European tourists, but they also have the Chinese tourists. that's an indication of the shift of economic power that's coming. And I know this is not how they planned it, but this is actually a great ad if you want to talk to people about megatrends. So thanks, Santam. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to show this to you, but I think as long as I give them credit, I'm okay. And now this is getting recorded. I'm thinking I might be out of a job tomorrow. 5 megatrends. And this is now for the tactile learners. I've learned if you want to have people's attention in the Western Cape, if you enter a room with a box like this, you know, it really does something. If I do it in New York, everybody's like, I'm not sure what's going on there. So the first one, demographic and social change. Anybody with kids in here? It's about the whole thing of babies and nappies. And if any, I think this is almost a newborn. If you want the nappy afterwards, I'm so tempted to say Alanta. My son, when he said it, I will see me, because this is being recorded. You know what I wanted to say. I think it's about 2 rands now. But it's how there's very interesting shifts happening around the world pertaining to death rates, birth rates, where it's happening, social changes, the empowerment of women. If you look at the whole issue in the US around gay rights and gay marriage, which literally in 2 years went from something like 30% of people thought that it's okay to have gay marriage, up to something like 78%. Now that's a 2-year shift. That's a momentous shift in a really short period of time. But that's the whole demographic and social change things. How are we on time? I think we're so far behind. If you're wondering how to get hold of me, Ria, so I'm blessed. My EA actually sits in Cape Town, even though I work in New York. And she's my timekeeper as well. So it's not just a random person I'm looking at here and picking on. Second one, shifting global economic power. I went into my little goodies bag, my little travel bag with all my passports, and so you have the US dollar and you have the pound and the euro. And Rio, you need to keep your eye on this because you know this is South Africa. And I don't have a card on it. But it is interesting, the shift from Western Europe and that part of the world. And then I'm very optimistic. I put a rand, I put 100 rand in there, but Indonesian, Rupiah, and renminbi. So that economic shift where the economic power is moving from the traditional Western democratic economies to different places in the world. And there's a lot of interesting things happening there. Rapid urbanization. Anybody who ever flew KLM business class? Got one? That's the only thing I could find on Rapid. But then I thought Rapid, and I wanted to impress you because I've traveled a lot. Rapid urbanization. And again, there's actually with KLM and the Dutch, the first people who really started moving around the world, as we know today, were the Dutch. And it's interesting if you look at Netherlands today and the role that they play and how they've absolutely cemented themselves as a knowledge and training industry. And how they've actually survived so much of the challenges Europe has had because of that. And they're all still sealed, so don't think, actually there's liquor in this. Jenever. Tastes pretty awful, but anyway. Climate change and resource scarcity. Wine Master Reserve. It's scarce, supposedly. Anybody here from Nedbank? Nederburg, sorry. Freudian slip there, I have a thing about Nedbank later. But I saw it and I thought there's something here. And it's really, when it comes to scarce resources, there's 3 things. It's load shedding, and load shedding. No, there's more to it than that. And then technological breakthroughs, and this is the only one for which I have a cheat sheet. My son is doing work on this is sugarcane, by the way. Oh, what did I write here? What they do is they take this and they break it down to the most basic plant form, cells. Then they do stuff with it, words that I can't pronounce. that makes this herbicide resistant. Then they put it back in the ground, and then it grows better, and it's herbicide resistant, so you can throw herbicides on it, but it doesn't die. Now, the implication of that is actually really cool, because it means bigger crops, and you can actually make fuel out of this. It's sugar. It's one of the purest forms of fuel, and ethanol. I think it's ethanol that they can get out of it. But it's really cool, I thought, something to remind us of technological shifts. Seeing that this is at a university and I need to have a little bit more than 5 interesting props, a couple of minutes very quickly on them. Demographic and social shifts. Life expectancy is a big issue there. Decline in birth rates. Human migration, it is amazing how you see. Those of you who actually live here don't see it. If you fly into Cape Town every 6 months and you drive around and you see how people move and the migration of people, if you go through Oliver Tambo, you see that there's a lot of this happening. Very interesting conversations around migration with the whole Ebola thing when that happened in Africa. The status of women is gradually changing. It's actually one of the places where South Africa do pretty well on all the national, international indexes. Ethnicity and social diversity. If any of you have ever been to any big world city today, you have pockets of the first people that go there is the Irish. You can always find an Irish pub, and there's always Irishmen in an Irish pub. But you can, it's a simple example. Again, remember the Irish beer and the whole thing. And they play pretty good cricket nowadays as well. But the Irish is usually first, and at some point the Dutch and the Chinese and the Portuguese. You just see these communities all over the world. If you're in New York, there's parts of New York. We live in New Jersey, very close to a place called Fort Lee. The signage is in Korean. But literally, there's not a shop sign in English. Everything's in Korean. I'm fluent in Korean right now. Now I'm moving to Houston in Texas because I'm freezing my butt off in New York, and I don't speak any Korean. It's interesting, this shift, where does the money lie? You know, we talk about the middle class and the value of that and home ownership and all of that. But if you look at what's happening in India, if you look at what's happening in China, to a lesser extent in South Africa, but also all over Africa. My brother just built a massive shopping mall in Ghana. And last time I was in Ghana, there was like dust and dirt. And yet it's this beautiful 5-star shopping mall in Accra. It all has to do with this shift in economic power. Consumption patterns, part of why Africa actually survived the whole economic crisis a little bit better is we're not so heavily reliant on commodities anymore, but there's a lot of consumption. Rebalancing of international relationships, we see this all the time. The whole nuclear race that's happening at the moment is part and parcel of this. Rapid urbanization, my 5 little houses, a lot of the things here that you're acutely aware of, and now my clicker is not working. Oh, right, I need to use force. Massive expansion of cities around the world. If you followed the whole debate around Qatar and the World Cup, they actually plan on building stadiums that they're going to break down and rebuild in different places again. This is really, really unique thinking or different thinking. Migration and childbirth, the impact on infrastructure, and I alluded to a little bit about when you fly into Cape Town and you just see land usage. I live in Somerset West, you drive out there, there's these developments and it's between a pylon and a highway. And then they say, amazing 5-star living, but it's just because there's no space left. I'm not sure if between a pylon and a highway is really that cool a place to live. But if there's no space left, and this is all part of that, traffic. So I left 5:45 this morning to be here at 6:30, but if I left at 6, I wouldn't have been in time for this lecture. Big issues around that, and opportunity. climate change and resource scarcity. This is the easiest one. It's energy, it's food, and the one people often forget is water. I'm often asked what's the biggest challenge for South Africa, and obviously Eskom is, everybody who knows anything about South Africa talks about that one. I actually don't think we talk enough about water. Don't be surprised if 2, 3, 4 years from now, water becomes a really, really big issue in Cape Town. Because I think we know, Eskom is so in your face and you feel it. Wait until everybody starts getting diarrhea because our water's not clean anymore. And I'm not predicting it, I don't want to be, I'm an extreme optimist. My wife will always point out I'm too optimistic. But watch out, you're going to hear my voice when that happens. What's interesting here in the technology field is it's just the speed at which this happens. So my tax at the best of times is a nightmare because I pay tax in 3 or 4 different countries. I have SARS on my case all the time. Yesterday, I got all sorts of emails that just made my day uncomfortable because I don't understand what's in there. But the biggest thing with tax is, where have you been when? If anybody here that pays tax in more than one country, I was hoping somebody can sympathize. And you end up filling in Excel spreadsheets and all sorts of things. And I'm at a point where I say, you know what? This thing goes with me everywhere. It knows when I go through a border. It knows when I change countries. It knows when I'm on an airplane. And all that data is in here. Won't it be really, really cool if all the tax authorities can actually use what's on here and just figure out what tax I need to pay? Yet I'm spending, and if I say 10, it's 50 of hours every year trying to sort out my tax, explain to people where I am. I have 3 passports, 3 South African passports. SARS doesn't like that, but that's just the kind of realities, and with big data, the kind of thing and technology that we can do. Who's accountants in here? Auditors, CAs, who's CAs? So the biggest nightmare for any CA before they sign off on something is the process around random sampling, because they never check everything. They usually sample the high risk, the whole risk criteria, and they sample stuff and they decide what to check. In the audit profession, one of the things we're talking about is we're not going to do that anymore. We're just going to check everything. Massive loads of data, and we're just going to check everything because technology allows us to do that. That was not possible 2, 3 years ago. Biotechnology, I've talked a little bit about. Sugar cane, nanotechnology, amazing. If you don't read The Economist, I love The Economist. If that's the only magazine you read, it's actually a pretty good read. But they really talk, there's amazing articles about nanotechnology in there. Fabrication, 3D printing, cloud computing, very interesting how even in PwC, how we look at security so differently, IT security, cybercrime and that sort of thing, and how to use the cloud better. Internet of Things. If you haven't done any reading on this, if you're wondering, seriously cool stuff happening in that space. The whole idea of thinking, we're at that point, we're very close to the point where the knowledge that we generate in this second is double the knowledge we generated in all of time before this second. And then the next second, we duplicate that again. If you start to think about the size of that, it's pretty cool. Right, how far behind are we, Ria? 20 minutes in, so we're only 6 or 7 minutes behind. At this point in time, before I continue, any comments, questions? Are we okay? I need to drink some water, so if you want to think about that, take a second. This is none of the speed dating yet. So from a strategy point of, and this is, they will get this thing, this presentation, so don't worry about that. I have some other handouts as well, and there's some other stuff that will be posted. What makes the megatrends really interesting to my theme of speed dating is if you get 2 people and they have their 5-minute chat and that spark is there, you know, then they seek each other out further, and they will talk again and hopefully go on a date and get married and then become a statistical speed dating. It's that chemistry. What's really cool about the megatrends is when you have that collision, that point where these megatrends come together. And that's where the business opportunity lies for the businessman. That's where the political opportunity lies for the politician. Nowadays, it sounds as if everybody that's business people in South Africa is politicians as well. I'm not sure which way around. But that's where the opportunity lies. That's where the fun begins. That's where, if we want to engage the generation that is actually sadly underrepresented in this room from what I can see, and no reflection on your age, but we don't seem to have many millennials in here. That's the kind of stuff that they think is really funky. The rise of agri-economies. How weird is it that 100 years after the British colonial powers went around Africa, we're at that point again. If you're a country that can really position yourself in the food safety space and actually get food to people, there's a reason China is buying up farms in Africa. They figured this one out. If there's an amazing opportunity there, and I'm stopping myself, because I can talk about all of these a lot of time, but think about it. Another one that you might want to think about is the city-state. I actually think that Cape Town is perfectly positioned to, I get goosebumps when I think about it, because I think if we work the city right, we can really become that definition of a city-state, where there's excellence, where everything is done well, where people have work, where we have innovation hubs, where we pull all of this together. They talk about the C20 versus the G20, where you're going to have these really, really big cities that's really states and down. Isn't it interesting, almost going back to the feudal system again, where you have these city-states? That's very interesting stuff to think about. The economy of ideas. So you actually, the whole thought of you getting paid for one idea or two ideas, and that's what so you generate an idea a week, and then that's what you've done for the week, and you get paid for it. It's one of the things that I personally really struggle with, and maybe it's my Calvinist background, but a big part of what I get paid for is to think. How cool is that? You're paid to think. And I think about things a lot, but it's weird, and I personally still struggle with it, because I get to the end of the week. It's lovely when I do things like this, because I can actually, I did a lecture at Stanford University, and I'm so posh. But I've been, I think, so I get paid to think. It's a really, really weird situation to be in. Innovation hubs. We need to figure out and crack the code of how do we truly embrace innovation. And an innovation hub doesn't necessarily mean a physical place. It can be a connection of individuals and people through other means other than being physically present in the same room. City brands, I've talked a little bit around that when I talked about C20 and G20. Reinventing your career. They say, you've seen some of the statistics when that we rolled before we started. You might end up having 14 careers. I'm in my third very distinctive career, potentially fourth very distinctive career, and I'm in my early 40s. It's how people do things. A rubbish-free world. If you think about it, if you start thinking that you actually print the stuff that you need, you don't need the boxes and the styrofoam and the shipping and the Amazon anymore. You think, I'm a big Trekkie. I love Star Trek. There's things in Star Trek that's going to become true. They haven't cracked the code on food yet, but on everything else, they can pretty much print it for you. Don't need to get to you in packaging. If you want to read interesting stuff, go and read about 3D printing. And it's at that point now in the US where if you have $3,000 or $4,000 to drop, you can actually have a 3D printer. It's not even ridiculously expensive anymore. Anyway, that's it. 15 questions. Let the speed dating begin. So what I'm going to do is literally 2 minutes on a question.
Where's China in this?
Sorry?
Where's China in this?
I'm not going to talk about China's not important anymore.
Okay.
No, China is really big on all of this. Couldn't agree more. I think if you want to look at a country that actually understands the megatrends and that in how they understand the megatrends are doing things and investing money in the right places, China's a really, I gave one example of agriculture. They're buying up the best agricultural land in Africa. And they're going to be, you think that China's going to be in a position because of nuclear arms or because they have a 5 million man army? It's not. They're going to control a lot of the food resources and water resources. Go and look at some of the work that China is doing around food safety. Mind-boggling. There's a really interesting thing happening with the New Zealand government and China at the moment. They just signed an understanding of memorandum of agreement around food safety, food security. China is bigger in that space than we realize. So about China, that's one of the things. So when you look at Chinese strategy and you think about these 5 things and the mega trends and where they collide, you actually start seeing Chinese students is all over America. They're all studying in the US. There's not an MBA program, there's not a university in the US that don't have a substantial number of Chinese students. So they're doing some really clever things because they understand this. But one of the 15 questions won't be specifically China. But we can make it question number 16, even though I might have answered it already. Is there anything left to be optimistic about in Africa? And now I just need to look at my notes to make sure I have my numbers right. And yes, I'm actually very, very optimistic about Africa. There's a couple of interesting things that has happened in the past decade or so. It's been interesting to see that growth. Africa actually did maintain growth in a period where a lot of places around the world we struggled. Not so good in South Africa, but other places in Africa. And yes, the economist in the room will tell me it's easy to grow off a really low standard. That's true, but growth is growth. So that's one. I think what's really powerful in Africa is consumerism and what's happening there, where you can actually see that the economies of Africa is less dependent on agriculture, mining, and substantially more dependent on consumerism. Rise of the middle class, really big one, positive things. If you're a business person here, and you can talk to the African middle class, you have a captured audience. It's interesting, currently we have about 7 billion people in the world. The way they extrapolate the world population to be in the 22nd century, so 85 years from now, is we will have about 4 billion people in Asia, we'll have about 4 billion people in Africa, and we will have about 1 billion in Europe and about 1 billion in North and South America. If I'm saying to you that Africa in population is going to be bigger or the same size as Asia in 85 years, something radical and drastic is going to happen in Africa. And it's going to be an amazing opportunity. So if you do your thinking right now, your kids might be really wealthy one day. What I really appreciate is access to our financial services. When I started as a young policeman, I had an account with Nedbank. And then I told you I had a Nedbank story. And then I tried to buy a house and Nedbank said to me, "No, we're not really into this business. We don't, policemen, you're not really the client we want." Anybody from Nedbank here? Take notes. Let me stand on this side of the room, behind this big computer screen. And then I went to ABSA, because ABSA was helping the Suid-Afrikaanse police. And I got a house, a mortgage. And then my life progressed and I studied and I got a degree and I got more degrees and I started working international as a consultant, not in the police anymore. And then I wanted to go abroad. And then ABSA, anybody from ABSA here? And then ABSA said, you know what, we not really, this going abroad thing, we're not really going to be able to service your loans. So I ended up with Investec. Anybody here from Investec? No, you know what, I know they looked at me and they thought I was a big risk, but nowadays I get calls from Netbank and outside and they say to me, do you want to come back as a client? And I said, no, I'm with Investec. No, it's a story, it's a reality, and I know where it comes from. But the story is all about access to financial services. And we're really blessed in South Africa in that we have a very, very, very mature FS system. But in Africa, there's more and more access around this. There's a lot of growth. I think all the banks I mentioned now, in their own right, is doing some pretty amazing things in that space. But it's a big thing to be positive about Africa. Can I tell you what's going to happen? Make a note about this. There's going to be some really big now I can't find my words. For coffee. Somewhere in Africa. And there's going to be no banking systems. It's going to be a natural disaster. Might not be Africa, might be somewhere else in the world. And donors are going to say, how do we get money from a donor organization into the hands of a person that really needs that money? And this is what they're going to do. They're going to put mini satellites into the stratosphere with helium balloons. And all they wanted me to get to each one of those individuals that needs the money is a cell phone. There will be no NGOs involved. There will be no government ministers involved that take a 25% cut. It's going to happen. Make a note, mark my words, within the next 5 years. We're going to fix. And it's really cool what's going to happen in this space. The whole corruption thing, you get rid of corruption if you don't have middlemen. And it's one of the most important things we need to think about. And I get excited, and now I'm getting sidetracked, and let me get back to my list. The gender gap in Africa is really cool. Africa actually does fairly well in the gender space. And it is interesting to see how so much of the development in Africa nowadays are actually funded through private equity. Also comes back to the FS systems. So there's a lot to be excited about South Africa. What about South Africa? So if you sit in the US for 6 months or so, everybody was watching the Pistorius case. You have no idea how big that thing was. So that's big. The other thing that was really big is the Vani. Lovey, that's my wife, by the way, if you're wondering. Maybe not so safe at the moment. We're visiting Cape Town. The miners' strikes and the striking that happens. Water and Lichte, more specifically Eskom and Lights, and the whole visa issue. And those are all pretty negative. Here's the cool thing. Everybody that watched that Pistorius thing, which was most probably bigger than any of the others put together, my intellectual peers and colleagues at PricewaterhouseCoopers, of whom a lot are lawyers, were so impressed by the fact that at least we still have the rule of law in South Africa. And it is actually something to get excited about. And that is very positive out there. So that's the one thing. I think South Africans are tremendously friendly. And it's not because I speak the language and I love the people. I just think we're really, truly a friendly people. And we're known for that around the world. And in PwC, we use a lot of secondis. So we're about 200,000 people, just under. Turnover is about 35 billion US, somewhere around there. So we're pretty big. If we were listed, we would have been a Fortune 50 company. We use a lot of secondis. At any given point in time, we have between 2 and 5% people on secondment, and that's not counting international business travelers. The people that are most loved, liked, appreciated anywhere in the world is our South African CAs. People just love them. They work hard. They work hard, and they actually get the work done. We have an amazing commodity of people power to sell, and we need to figure out how we're going to do that. And the nice thing with technology nowadays, Ria and myself is a great example. I think Ria is one of the best EAs we have in the organization. We don't need to sit next to each other to have a really impactful work relationship. We need to figure out how we're going to use technology to unlock this knowledge and this wealth of people that we have, and we're friendly, and we understand diversity, and we might not always like it, but we understand it, and it just comes back. A lot of things in that sense to get positive about South Africa. What's up with millennials? Who of you can actually tell me what's the definition of a millennial? Anybody who wants to have a go? No, but you look like a millennial, or you're borderline, so you're not allowed to. Come on, any one of the people that have less hair than me want to try. Have you ever heard the term millennial? Anybody want to go at what's the definition of a millennial? Yes, people born after 1990. So I have 4 millennials in my life. 22, 21, 20, and 18, and now everybody's looking at my wife and thinking, shame. There's a bit of a story there as well. Now I want to say they're not all mine, now they've been even worse. But it is, well, they're not all hers. I mean, you think, there's something weird going on there. But it's if you don't surround yourself and actively engage in understanding millennials, if it's the only thing you take away from this session is get to know young people. By the way, just as a side point, really interesting research on aging well. The way to age well is to surround yourself with young people. So I'm getting scared. There's a camera there, there's a camera, there's a mic here, there's a mic here, and then everything I say is on a cell phone over here as well and being live tweeted as we talk. You see, I'm not a millennial. If I was a millennial, that's fine, that's how it is. Seriously, you need to get to know your young people. In PwC, average age in PwC is 27 years, which basically means that once you kill out the dinosaurs like myself, our average age is somewhere around 25. You need to know what motivates millennials, you need to know what drives them. I don't have time. If I had time, I would have done a couple of questions around what do you think you know about millennials. So here's the hot tip I'm giving you. Harvard Business Review just published a really cool set of research. Remind me that we sent them links. There's 5 studies, a major study, and then 5 subcomponents on millennials, what they do, what they like. Interesting fact is that not all millennials are the same. Millennials in Africa are actually very different to millennials around the rest of the world on a number of issues. In Africa, they only looked at Nigeria and South Africa, but those are the 2 economies driving Africa at the moment. Understand this. So one of their questions was, why does millennials want to be leaders? And I'm going to give you 5 things now, and then I'm going to ask us to vote by our hand. So the first thing is, I want to be a leader because it increased my future earnings. Think about that. Second one, I want to be a leader because it gives me the opportunity to influence the organization. That was the second option. I want to be a leader because of the strategic challenges that it presents me. Third one. I want to be a leader because it gives me the power to make decisions. Fourth one. And the last one is I want to be a leader because it gives me challenging work. So those were the 5 questions asked to 30,000 millennials around the world, of whom I think about 1,000 was from South Africa, pretty even split between Nigeria and South Africa. And I think around 420 you were at a 2% deviation, so a fairly accurate sample in that sense. So who do you think of those 5? Who says number 1, future earnings? That's why millennials in South Africa wants to be in leadership. We have 1 millennial at the back saying that. Influence, ability to influence the organization. There's a fair showing of hands. Because of the strategic challenges it presents. A couple of hands. Power to make decisions. Interesting, right? That's definitely the biggest one so far because of challenging work. Right, now I'm going to burst your bubble. Go and read the research. So if you take those 5 questions and you take the geopolitical areas they sampled, Africa being one, there's 5 or 6 areas, South America, North America, Asia, Europe. There's actually a lot of difference between what millennials want in that space. In South Africa, influence, the ability to influence the organization was more than double than the responses for any one of the other questions. So imagine you sitting there and you think the millennials working for you want challenging work. And actually all they want to do is influence the organization that you own. And you all know it's not that simple, because the fact that the group of millennials said this is, what's the value of this? It makes you think about that social change that's happening, the mega trend, and how it's impacting your work environment. If you don't know what motivates your millennials, as I said, I have 4. All 4 of them communicate with me differently. One uses WhatsApp, one uses Snapchat, one uses BlackBerry, and one, if I'm lucky, responds to an SMS that I send him on the cell phone that I'm paying for. They all want to do different things. One of them is looking for work, one of them is an honor student, one of them is a 3rd year, and one is a, what do they call them? Freshman. Is a freshman. Sophomore is the first one. Is a freshman, and she thinks she wants to do industrial psychology, but actually she wants to be in business. So for each and every one of them, I have different conversations, different things to talk about motivation, different things to get them engaged. It's all about engagement. 3 of those 4 are actually female. Now, if you think just normal females are difficult, millennial females are really challenging. And I know I'm putting myself out there. Everything is being recorded. No, why? There's actually 2 interesting things if you talk to female millennials. And they would also have a nice thing we can forward them. If I flood, there's something. So on your reminder, sorry, I'm just getting these things that I want to put on the web. They all feel pretty confident. Their confidence level is somewhere around 70%. And confident means I can do the job, I will do the job, I'm the best at doing the job and everything else. And ironically, research actually supports that confidence. They are actually cleverer than men, better at doing work. They're just better, face it. The other problem, and this is a key, and again, if you want to engage your millennials, figure out how to crack this code, but yet 73% of them still feels that they're being discriminated against. There's a real big issue there. So we've done really well in building up the confidence and the skill sets and all of that collectively, everybody, but there's still a sense of discrimination. Figure that one out if you're a business. I think we're so far behind. What does CEO thinks? I have 20 of these. We will post it electronically as well. This is actually a really, really nice read. It's our annual CEO survey, and as I said, there's 20. Feel free to take one. You don't need to leave any cash, but cash will be appreciated. This is South Africa. If you get an opportunity to ask for one, no, you can just take one. We will give you an electronic copy. You can actually get an electronic copy on our global website, just pwc.com as well. But it is interesting, a couple of things came out of this. For the first time in 5 years, CEOs in this, and it's a global survey, actually think that there's more opportunity in the US than in China. So if there's one thing as an interesting side note, you should have a look at that. I have no idea where I'm on my little list. They actually have, the biggest concern they have is overregulation. A lot of the screw-ups in Africa that we have is because we don't have enough structure. We shouldn't equate structure with regulation. I think if we're going to fall into the trap of just regulating all the time, firstly, it creates opportunity for corruption. But there's a real danger in trying to regulate things that really shouldn't be regulated. Over-regulation, and this is across the board. So if you're a regulator, I'm not allowed to ask if there's regulators in this room because it might be, no, I can. Any regulators in the room? Anybody hear that? Because I'm going to pick on you the rest of the day. That works for a regulatory agency. And now you're thinking, what's a regulatory agency? Don't worry. If you were a regulator, you would have known. Big issue with regulators and how we're going to deal with it. Big issue with cybercrime. It went from last year almost not an issue to one of the top things this year. So when you think mega trends, if you think technology, if you think urbanization, big cities, also think about all of those things are happening in the waves and the microwaves. No, microwaves, now my son is like a dad, it's not microwaves. Whatever those waves are, radio waves that's flying around us. It's at that level as well. So it's not just on that tangible level, it's on the cyberspace level as well. A lot being said about, let me just make sure I've got it all. Government debt. I think it's, if you want to take South Africa, one of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about is I think our government debt is getting out of control. And I had a lot of, we can talk about that a lot. The whole RRRR issue around skills, right place, right time, right price. If you can crack the code, and at 12:45, it's definitely in your benefit to crack the code, to figure out how the skills that we have here, you can connect with somebody who's willing to pay you $1 or €1 amount for those skills, while you keep that skill set on our cost base. There's a lot of opportunity there. I often think, why are we not bigger players in the outsourcing back office kind of environment around the world? I have 10 minutes left. There's like 10 minutes to right. Now I can do 10 more questions in, because the last one is just my email address. I do need to take a little bit of a voice break. So I'm going to play you a video now so that I can just drink something and then we'll go on. But the video is what does CEOs say? So they actually in the US, PwC made a video clip of 2 minutes about the US version of this. Unfortunately, we don't have that video for the African version yet, but I think it's pretty cool. So listen to this while I drink water. It's literally just over 2 minutes.
One thing that I think is the most critical capability for CEOs to cultivate is the ability to lead and manage people.
Most great successful leaders got things done by bringing in great talent.
Identify trends, see opportunities, but most importantly, be a developer of people.
Connectivity, to me, you got to be connected to your employees.
Your ability to relate to your employees, your ability to be flexible, your ability to solve problems and trust people that they're going to be able to solve problems.
CEOs to be successful in the future environment and the current environment is adaptability. To adapt to a rapidly changing environment.
The flexibility and the adaptability to take all the change that's coming at them.
I think you just have to be agile. There's elements of that to me that's open-mindedness.
Any CEO in today has to be reaching outside their core industry or the core people they deal with on an everyday basis.
To be able to think differently.
The capability I'd like to see all CEOs lean into for tomorrow is entrepreneurship.
Gotta be able to create the new and different.
Being able to form a business model is the must-have for a CEO.
The one attribute CEOs need in the future to succeed, I would place my bet on curiosity.
Curiosity combined with self-reflection and innate confidence.
The ability to connect the dots. The world will tell you where it's going. It will tell you what it needs. But it's going to be in code.
I encourage them to be strategic, to think ahead, to connect the dots in a simple way to do it.
The ability to manage complexity, yet make things simple.
You have to see around the corner, we have to get the organization around the corner, you can get it around the corner in one piece, moving together, and that's a host of different skills.
The most important capability for a CEO working in healthcare is to be sure that everything that CEO is doing, fostering, or enabling is geared towards advancing patient care program.
They said it better than I can, and they most probably have more credibility as well. But isn't it interesting how they use terms like connecting the dots? The answer is there, you just need to connect the dots. And as you think about megatrends, as you think about how urbanization, technology impact what you're doing on a daily basis, the challenge, the strategic challenge, as well as the business opportunity, lie in your ability to connect those dots. Let's go on with the speed dating. I think we're down to 6 minutes. Is the US still important? Yes. As I mentioned, actually the first time in 5 years, CEOs feel that the opportunity to grow their business is bigger in the US than in China. Still, those are the two biggest opportunities. And all I will tell you, I now lived in the US twice, never write of American. I've seen some of the amazing things around the oil industry, and you know oil is at $53, and I think Houston is going into the at suicidal point. It is truly amazing to see how those individuals just think about business and how big they think about and how they believe in themselves and how they actually pull together as a country if it really gets tough. Don't ever write that off American. That's all I will tell you. They work hard. In that sense, very similar to what we have to offer. The only problem we have is we don't have the amount of cash that backs us. But don't write off the Americans. It's worthwhile building a relationship there if you think about it. What about Japan? People will always ask me, well, what about Japan if you talk Asia? I'll say two things about the Japanese. Great food. No, that's not what I'm going to say. The Japanese sits with a really interesting social thing in that they're aging, they're graying at a tremendous rate, and their women are not active in the workforce. If you listen to their president, there's around his abenomics strategy, there's a lot happening on how do we pull women into the workforce. They have lifelong employment, but here's the kicker with the Japanese. They actually sit on boatloads of savings. If you truly want to get into a place where there's cash and cash available, go to the Japan market. If you can think something, if you can try and crack that code, it's not an easy code to crack, but don't write off the Japanese. I'm not going to talk about the Indias and the Brazils and the Chinas. That story we know, but don't write off the first and the second biggest economy in the world. There's a lot of opportunity there. What geographies matter? I've mentioned to you my bias that I have personally towards Africa, and I think it's a well-founded bias. I think the Middle East has some really interesting challenges. If we can figure out how to make things work there, or just accept that they maybe don't work the way we think they should work, there's a lot of interesting opportunity there. Central and Eastern Europe and the Confederation of Independent States, CEE-CIS. A lot of opportunity if you can, in the stance, if you can get around corruption, which is a big issue. Russia obviously has its own set of problems, and as you know, what I have the issues of the Ukraine, but a lot of opportunity. Interestingly, the culture, because of the ex-Soviet Union culture, really difficult sometimes because people don't get that, you work more and you do more and you go over and above. It's just, I get to the office, I work, I go home, because that's how it worked when it was communism. big challenges there as well between the millennials that were all born after the fall of the wall and the people who's actually in the decision-making positions in organizations. But a lot of opportunity in that part of the world. Then obviously China, India. I will never write of Indonesia. Indonesia is one of my favorite countries in the world. They actually get a lot of things really right. They have a democracy that actually works, and the biggest Muslim democracy in the world. Don't write of the Indonesians. Turkey, part of the Middle East, think about Mexico, but I think the Americans is all over that one. Those are the geographies that really matter. The problem with even asking this question is you immediately discount Lesotho and Swaziland and South Africa and the Northern Cape. And you know what? There's opportunity there as well. Depending on how you connect the dots, there's always opportunity. You don't only need to look at the big ones. Any hope for innovation? I actually think that one of the things, if we get it right in South Africa and maybe in Cape Town, is how we start to think about innovation. But we need to think about things like incrementalism. We think innovation is brand new stuff. If you look at some of the most innovative, successful companies in the world, Apple being the first one that jumps to mind. They pretty much look what other people do, look what's in the market, they do it better, they improve it. That's why you have an iPhone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're pretty good at it. Don't write incrementalism off. It's often about execution. There's often really, really cool ideas. I will challenge you, if you have something that you're really struggling with at work, get the 5 youngest people in your company together and say, do you have an idea how we can solve it? You will be amazed how many people actually say to you, they have an idea, but that idea just doesn't get to you. If you have a good idea to how to actually implement it and get it to a product, that's part of the challenge. But those are the kind of things I really think innovation has a lot of scope and space, and it's not something that you should just write off. I think innovation is a really cool way. If you look at the Cape Town context where you can bring urbanization and technology, and you have some really cool universities here, if you pull all of that together in the right way, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And innovation hubs, I already spoke about that now for a second as well. I'm out of time, so let me show you how the speed. So now I've met somebody that I really like, but I'm still committed to 4 more days. You go like, is off the grid possible? Yes, totally. And I think you need to think about it. I see off-grid houses are now for sale in Somerset West. No electricity bill, no water bill. Off-grid business is the next one. If you can take your business off the grid, it's worthwhile thinking about it. How to survive the mega trends. So here's one of the things that I personally struggled with. So I've been immersed in this for the better part of 2-3 years. And when you start to read things about artificial intelligence and how knowledge is literally doubling, and you're going to get, they have a big word for it, where the second and the next second, and I never can remember the word, but you think about those, not that, and you think that in 7 Wall Street journals, there's more information that somebody would have gathered in their whole life 150 years ago. You almost get to this point, oh, where's all of this going? And one of the things that I had to do to deal with this was to just get really comfortable with the fact that I don't know everything, and that it is happening, and it's happening really fast. And my son, who's 20, is doing stuff that half the words he uses I don't understand. It's pretty amazing that when I was 16, he thought I was really dumb. When I was 18, he came to the realization that his dad is actually not that dumb. And now that he's 22, I'm starting to realize he's actually not that dumb. Get comfortable with the fact that a 20-year-old knows more about things, that they're more intuitive on some of these things. So that would be my advice on the mega trends. Understand them in your business context, and actually use it as a conversation starter when you talk to younger people, when you talk about business opportunity. when you think, if we want to take something like ESCOM, and I could have beaten up that whole thing. I could have gone really negative on the ESCOM thing. What's the opportunity there? We have a regulator that, if I were in Cape Town, if I was the mayor of Cape Town today, I would try and see if I can actually use the equity that I have as a city that's most probably better than any other city in Africa. If I can get access to funds, and I'll build another nuclear power plant just for Africa or just for Cape Town. And people, not all people like nuclear power plants, but I would seriously consider doing that. Maybe we can convert the Greenpoint Stadium into a nuclear power plant. That's, and it's a radical idea, but there's a lot of opportunity in these things. And final thoughts on Cape Town. As I said, that's just one really way out thing to think about. You live in really pretty much one of the coolest places in the world. And I think I can actually say that. I've been to a lot of places in the world. And I tell you, there's not a lot of places cooler than that. Think about it. We have nice people. We have 2 oceans. We have freaking nice mountains. We have amazing agriculture. We just have, in a radius of 100 kilometers, we really have Eden here. Unfortunately, Eden is an 18-hour flight away from New York. So we need to figure out how to bridge those gaps. We need to figure out how to get beyond electricity. We need to figure out how to get Cape Town out of the political conversation that it's constantly in. Those are the kinds of things in the Cape Townian context that I get excited with, that I think there's opportunity. We need to figure out how we're going to deal with mega migration. If we get Cape Town right, people want to live here. And yes, I hear all the arguments. Oh, you know what? The ANC is busing in people by the hundreds of thousands because, maybe they are. But I promise you, if I live in Transkei and I get on a bus, come to Cape Town, it's because I think it's going to be better here. And if you set yourself up, there's something, if you're an amazing city, there's stuff that comes with it. Rapid urbanization is one of it. How are you going to think about it? How are you going to address the water problems of tomorrow? Is it time to actually start taxing underground water? A lot of things to think about. That's my final thought on Cape Town. If you want to get hold of me, talk to Ria. No, if you want to get hold of me in the beginning of the slides, my email address. I'm not good on phones, I'm not good on Twitter, I'm not good on Snapchat, I'm not good on Instagram, I'm not good on WhatsApp, I'm not good on VDM. I'm really good on email. I read my emails every day, and I actually try to respond to every email that even if it's just to respond, I can't talk now. I love chatting to people. If you want to have a chat and let's do a call, that's all doable. This was fun. I think we have 5 minutes left for questions. Before anybody's allowed to ask a question, you must commit to buying the book. No. Any questions?
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. What my concern is that you seem to have a lot of focus in some cases. Because one of the major mega trends is the increasing sort of population of the world. If you look at it as a cause of 4 of your main mega trends there. So this is unsustainable. So what is the solution to this thing here? And secondly, you haven't mentioned anything about the rise of Islam. This is a major mega trend now. The forecast is that by 2040, half of the population of Europe will be sort of Muslim. And that's likely to go a curveball in all these forecasts that you have over there.
I agree totally with you. The whole Muslim thing I will put under as part of the social and demographic shift. Absolutely couldn't agree with you more. That is a challenge and we need to crack it. I don't think it's more of a challenge than some of the other issues. If you ask me what will one of the others be, it will actually be the one on population growth. My answer on population growth is a couple of things might happen. The one thing that I believe will definitely happen is and we've seen this, we've seen it all over Asia, we've seen it in parts of Africa like South Africa as well. The moment your middle class grow, the moment education grow, the moment women are more educated, all which is things that's happening in the context of the megatrends at the moment. there will be an impact on that. Africa is behind the curveball on it. It's the slowest. That's why people think we'll most probably get to 4 billion people in 75. The one thing, the second thing that I think might happen is there might actually be some sort of catastrophe that actually just resets our population, and that might be a flu or something that happens. We saw some of it potentially happening in Ebola. So there's two ways I'll look at it. There's an economic answer I'll give to you around education, consumerism, growing of your middle class and everything that goes with that. But I will never write off the fact that something can just really go wrong as far as some of the diseases we see. But on the Islam one, it is. If we can't get to a point, and I flew out of the US a week ago. In the US, the whole debate is about Obama not being willing to call it radical Islam. And he refers to it as terrorism. But there's definitely something there, and we need to figure it out. I am blessed in that my colleague that I work with that's closest to me is Egyptian, and she's Islam. So we're having a lot of these conversations, and she actually had different views, to be honest. I think if we can have more dialogue around it, we'll get to a point. I actually think there's a lot of moderate Muslims in the world, way more than we think, because the only bits of pieces we saw, this is the bits that's not moderate. But great questions, both of them. I knew there was a difficult one getting there. Anybody that makes notes when you write, always ask good questions.
You mentioned what CEOs think, that they feel there's over-regulation. Surely the 2008 financial collapse was because the banks were not sufficiently regulated.
Right, next question. Yeah, no, well, and you can argue that what they're trying to fix with Sarbanes-Oxley after Anderson and Enron was also because of a lack of regulation. So I think over-regulation versus balanced regulation is a whole conversation. And to your point, the liquidity test and stuff that they brought into the banking sector is a great example. If you look at what happened with the LIBOR exchange rates in London as well, and that whole fiasco, you can argue that was also because of under-regulation. And now I'm again recording. No, he's not recording. He's recording. But yeah, so it's a balance. I think I can talk about PwC US. In an organization of close to 40,000 people, their compliance office is almost 200 people. And that's just getting people to comply to stuff that they need to comply to. So it is a massive overhead. It's a big risk in a litigated-rich environment. I think the concern is that people spend a disproportionate of money doing some of the basic stuff. But I can't argue that point, and I will throw into that argument the whole LIBOR thing and what happened there as well. So it's no regulation versus right regulation versus regulation that creates opportunity where you need to pay facilitation to get beyond the regulation. And I think that's where some of the concern lies, because it moves into the corruption.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Linda. Last week there was a special report in The Economist about South America and the Hispanic population and how they will become increasingly more important for the US as their population is aging. In your view, at the moment, is that a big hot topic? Are they realizing that? Is it something that they're addressing right now? Or
the Americans is acutely aware of the fact that Spanish will be spoken by more people than English fairly soon. I'm not sure what that time frame is. If you look at the whole issues around Obama and what they're trying to do around legalizing the 14 million or so people that's not legal in the US at the moment, and 99.999% of them is from Latin America. It's definitely something they think about all the time. Your agent comment right on there, the way you think about it is spot on, because where do you get labor? Where do you get young people if you don't get immigrants? America is an immigration country. So they've always grown themselves out of immigration, and they pride themselves on their diversity. Very relevant issue. Whenever I'm in New York, I have a guy that drives us from
El Salvador.
El Salvador, and he always tells me, and every time he sees me, he gives me a resume of one of his nephews in El Salvador and asks me to pass it on. It is a big part. There's parts in the US, we actually live between the Korean part in Fort Lee on the one hand and North Bergen. We live between the biggest Hispanic community in New Jersey and the biggest Korean community in New Jersey. And if you're in those environments, you realize how, because in the Spanish part, everything's in Spanish. In the Korean part, everything's Korean. I love the fact that you read The Economist, keep on doing that. The best thing you can ever do. Other question, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I'm going to go to another question. Anything else? I think we're running out of time.
Could you just share some ideas in the healthcare sector, in specifically the private healthcare sector?
A lot of money to be made. No, if you look at healthcare, there's a couple of interesting things you need to think about. You need to think about what's working and what's not working in the US, because I think there's actually an interesting case study there. Back to The Economist, there was actually a really good article in The Economist on Obamacare 2 weeks ago, where they talk about how people are actually now getting access to care, and how, because they're walking away from, and this is my own words now, I'm paraphrasing, you get paid for final solution versus steps. So you don't pay for the swab and the needle and everything, you pay for the fact that you fix somebody and that they are fixed. That's actually already radically brought down the cost of healthcare in the US. So that's one thing you need to look at. I think in the African context, the thing you need to look at is two things. How do you keep a standard going? Because if you can transplant penises, you have a pretty good healthcare system. How do you keep that standard going? And how do you actually charge a rate for that from people that's willing to pay for that? And the other side of that coin is, how do you make sure that there's basic healthcare for people that can't afford that? And how do you go through the political quagmire of creating that? And this happens all over Africa. So we have a whole expat support system because we have people anywhere in the world. I have a number that I can phone now, and this is not a problem here. I know South Africa, but if I was in Colombia now, and there will be a doctor there, and if need be, they will send a helicopter or a plane, and they will evacuate me and get me to a place. And so on the one hand, you have that kind of ability within your expat community. And in South Africa, it's not just the expat community, people that's willing and able to pay for healthcare, how you deal with that. And then on the other side, how do you get the basics right for people that can't afford it? But healthcare, again, is another really hot topic, because if you don't get it right, you get what we had with Ebola, and we're still trying to pick those pieces up, because some of the basics were just not in place to get on top of that thing quickly enough. I'm an academic doctor, I'm not a medical doctor. I think we're supposed to stop. Let's do one more question. Better be a good one, because it's the last one.
Where does global poverty fit in?
It's actually, if you look at the UN reports on global poverty, depending on how, and this is one of those half full, half empty glass conversations, you can argue that we've actually done pretty well in, go and look at the UN reports on poverty. So let's start with the glass half full conversation. I think we've done well. Let's look at the half empty approach. I don't think we do enough. I actually, my own view on alleviating poverty, there's a number of individuals that I see as part of who I support in South Africa, for whom I'm a financial system, a TV license, a bank, a pension fund. I think each and every one of us have a responsibility to take way beyond what I think a lot of people do. I think government has a bigger role to play. I don't necessarily think that the idea of you just get money because you don't have work is a good idea. I think we can learn from the Japanese, where anybody been to Tokyo lately? So in Tokyo is the cleanest place. You can literally, the 2-second rule apply in the middle of Tokyo. If it falls, you can pick it up and eat it. It's an extremely clean city. What the Japanese do is, if you get the social grant, because you're unemployed. You clean. So they have work teams, so you get your money, but you clean. You don't just sit at home. So if you ask me the poverty question, I think there's a lot we need to do as individuals. I think there's a lot we can do as government, better to rethink how we do it. I think there's definitely the approach to alleviate poverty is job creation. So, you know, the whole concept of teach a man to fish rather than to give him a fish. But you know what, I drove in this morning and you see people getting on taxis and buses at 5 in the morning to get somewhere to a job. They barely survive. They get home. They don't. It's not right. It doesn't feel right, even though I can show you all the statistics saying we're moving in the right direction. That's a tough question. So I will tell you, between healthcare, population growth, poverty, you've thrown a couple of really tough ones at me. So thank you for this. I think we're done. Buy the book. If you want one of these, have it. There's a number of things we will share on some of the studies I talked about. We'll make sure you have online access. Thanks.
Coeni, thank you very much. I think it was a great opportunity for all of us to have this talk. It was a great opportunity, and I think it was wonderful to hear more about your insights, your experience globally, and be able to answer these difficult questions. And thank you very much for that. But on behalf of the university, everybody here, just a full token of thanks for the time that you spent with us this morning, and we wish you all the best in your endeavors.
Thank you.
I